a transformation that took him out of his culture, took him out of his context, his place of comfort, out of everything he knew. He saw the world beyond the plantation, beyond the enslaved labor camp on which he was raised. He saw people, all people, in a whole new light. Few of us will undergo a transformation of this magnitude, though some of us may. And it is not the case that everyone who has the same exposure, the same experience, the same invitation to change has the same sort of internal transformation. Why? Why him? Sometimes we just don't know. Not all transformations are easy to see or to understand, and not all are so morally laden. I think of a friend who had struggled with addiction to alcohol. One day he told me the story of how he became sober. After many, many attempts, one day it worked. I asked him why. Why then? Why that particular day? He couldn't say. We don't always know when or how or where or why or even if we may be transformed. So today I'd like to consider transformation, what we think we know about it, and perhaps what we don't know about it. And it is, after all, one of our Unitarian Universalist values. Now, I'm just curious, is there a slide that has the image with love at the center by any chance? Okay, no problem. So a lot of you probably have seen the image that has love at the center and then 6 values around it. Oh, let's see if we can name them. Justice. Interdependence. What's that? Generosity. Pluralism, good job. Oh, look at this. Dun, da, da. See, I think the flower one is more official, but I really like this one. So, justice, equity, generosity, pluralism, transformation, and interdependence. You did very well. I'm impressed. So, it's part of the revised Article 2 in the Unitarian Universalist Association bylaws. It's part of the covenant that we have among our congregations. Over 1,000 congregations that make up our association of congregations. And there's some history here. I suspect some of you know it and some of you don't, so let me explain briefly. Article 2 is a really special part of our bylaws. While much of our bylaws, like most bylaws, is about government, our how, Article 2 is about our why, our reason for being, our agreements and our promises. For those of you who've been around a minute, Article 2 is where our principles and sources were previously found. The principles and sources have been removed and replaced with updated, dare I say, transformed language. So I have a confession. I was on an extended sabbatical during the time leading up to the 2024 change of Article 2, and so I was not a participant in the process. I accepted it, but I was not sure I liked it. After all, I've been preaching on the 7 principles and the 6 sources for decades. I could recite all those principles by heart. Now I had to learn a whole new thing. I suspect some of you may be in that camp. Others of you, congratulations, may be more flexible and may have moved on. But for me, it took a few reminders, some time for me to come around. First, I was reminded that just because the principles and sources weren't in the bylaws anymore didn't mean they had disappeared completely. They're still mine to use if I wish, all of us. Second, I was reminded that ours is a living tradition. That means change. Liberal religious traditions are in part defined by their willingness to adapt. And third, I was reminded that our bylaws specifically state that if there had been no review of Article 2 in 15 years, if there had been no review of Article 2 in 15 years, then the Unitarian Universalist Association Board was required to appoint a commission to study Article 2 and make recommendations for appropriate revisions. So not only does our liberal religious tradition grow and change, but we have built that into our official structures. And so, with those reminders in hand, I made a decision to become one with the new values, and I made a commitment to myself to explore them in 2026. And since we're here together this morning, I invite you to be part of that journey. So I decided to begin with transformation, which Article 2 describes like this. We adapt to a changing world. We covenant to collectively transform and grow spiritually and ethically. Openness to change is fundamental to our Unitarian and Universalist heritages. Never complete, never perfect. Now, a side note about the use of language. The old Article 2 had one use of the word transformation. It was in the section we called the sources, and there was a reference to the transforming power of love. Still there, we've just moved it to the center now. In the new Article 2, the word transforming or transform appears 3 times. So there are 5 sections, the second of which, values and covenant, describe the values. That's what I just shared from. The word transformation also appears in the first section titled purposes. What is the purpose of our organization? After listing things that you would expect, like supporting congregations and leaders and creating new ones, the section ends with, the Unitarian Universalist Association will actively engage its members in the transformation of the world through liberating love. One of our purposes is the transformation of the world through liberating love. The word transformation also appears in the third section, inspirations. This is the section that replaces what we knew as the sources. It begins this way. Direct experiences of transcending mystery and wonder, direct experience of transcending mystery and wonder are the primary sources of Unitarian Universalist inspiration. These experiences open our hearts, renew our spirits, and transform our lives. Our direct experiences transform us. I know that as people of reason, we like to believe that it is data that changes our minds. And that's called out too in a place where it says that we draw on sacred, secular, and scientific understandings. But I think it's a little more complicated than that. I think a truthful telling is that it is often our direct experience that finally, after all that data, transforms us. I admit I was curious about this increase in the use of the word transformation, and I wondered if it was something specific to our movement. So I popped the word into one of those online tools that graphs usage over time. Those are super fun if you haven't played with one yet. Anyway, it turns out the word transformation is used significantly more now than it was in 1985, 40 years ago when the previous Article 2 was written. Is this an example of us adapting to the world in which we find ourselves? Or is it because all around us, increasingly, the rapid pace of change in our world is impossible to ignore? So again, this morning, our working definition of the Unitarian Universalist value of transformation is we adapt to a changing world. We covenant to collectively transform and grow spiritually and ethically. Openness to change is fundamental to our Unitarian and Universalist heritages, never complete, never perfect. Now, some might express concern that adapting to a changing world implies that our values are not grounded, that they are transient. But let's look at some examples. Broadly, consider the value to love your neighbor, a commandment that comes to us from the Hebrew and Christian scriptures. In the book of Leviticus, comes first as your neighbor is your fellow Israelites. But then later it expands and includes the stranger living among you. That's actually a piece that we are hearing quoted more often these days as we deal with the differing opinions of the immigrants living in our community as our neighbors. Then later, Jesus expands that value. You're also to love not just your fellow Israelites, not just the stranger living among you. You are to love your enemy. Oh, the command is to love your neighbor. That did not change. However, the world expanded and the understanding of exactly who is a neighbor did. In our hyper-connected world, I would assert that our understanding of who our neighbor is must continue to change and evolve. Another example, this one more closely tied to our tradition. Our tradition is the merger of two earlier traditions, the Unitarians and the Universalists. Both considered themselves liberal Christians. They promoted freedom, tolerance, reason, and love. However, as time went on, the merged tradition became something more than Christian. The openness treasured by our spiritual ancestors initially allowed them to welcome other Christians. That is, after all, who they were primarily exposed to. But as travel and communication expanded, revealing more opportunities for insight and understanding, both traditions, both from other traditions and from science, it made more and more sense to expand the welcome. In doing so, our religious tradition has been transformed, growing out of, but not restricted to Christianity. Our values have changed. Our values have not changed. How they are expressed and how we are inspired has. But in some cases, values do change. That's what happened to Randall Fletcher when his Quaker classmates invited him to expand his worldview. My guess is that some of us gathered this morning have encountered values-changing transformation. Interestingly, the people sitting next to them may have no idea of the depth of the journey that they've been on, the struggles they have endured, or the losses they have experienced. For this, if for no other reason, we should be kind to one another. Others of us, and I include myself in this category, have primarily encountered what I would call values deepening transformation rather than values changing transformation. I can't say that there are many things that I strongly believe now that are in stark contrast to what I was raised to believe. I have a deeper and more fuller understanding, yes. And while I think some of my choices continue to bewilder my family members, it's a matter of degree and not direction. So how about you? How about you? Where do you find yourself? Have you encountered values changing transformation? Have you primarily encountered values deepening transformation? Maybe some of each. Maybe that question's something to journal about later this week. Transformation, we adapt to a changing world. We transform and grow spiritually and ethically. Our society, our traditions, our institutions, they all change. They evolve and transform. And we, as individuals, change. I invite you to consider change and transformation and how that has been in your life. Were you, like Fletcher, born open to grace, new insight, and expanded horizons? Or did you learn or develop that openness? Are you learning it still? And of the things that you say you believe, of the things you say you believe, is there anything you sometimes struggle with? Is finding the worth and dignity of some people a challenge? Remember, Fletcher thought of himself as a good person. Is justice, equity, and compassion a challenge in your relationships in the real world, not just when it's a social concept? What about acceptance and encouragement of one another? Can we really do it? How about here in this congregation? How does that work? Even with people who are kind of out there, or people who seem kind of rigid, can you continue to open to new learning? Or do you already know it all? If so, speak to me later. When you encounter new ideas, are you willing to wrestle with them? Are you willing to take responsibility? That's what happened to Fletcher. He couldn't live with what he now knew. To have integrity, he had to come back into alignment. Are you in alignment with your values, your stated beliefs, your understanding of the world? Think about your transformations. Would you have walked willingly into them if someone had told you up front that everything would be different? I mean, would I really agree to an experience that would give me a whole new understanding if I knew it would upend my future as I understood it and estrange me from my family and everything I know? If Fletcher had known in advance the full measure of the break he would need to make with his family and culture, I wonder if he would have even spoken to those Quakers, let alone traveled with them to Philadelphia. I mean, after the fact, we're often glad for the change, but if we'd known in advance, I mean, theoretically, we can back off and not be transformed. I can understand turning back because if we transform, we have to act. And yet, can we really turn back? I mean, can we really unknow the thing that we now know? If we know, once we are transformed, we may be compelled to act differently. Are we willing to act according to our beliefs to bring our values to life as action in the world? Our society, our traditions, our institutions, they all change. And we as individuals change. What of our congregations? In what ways are our congregations, is this congregation a place of transformation? I invite you to consider 3 features that might help a congregation be transformative, or even more transformative. First, it seems to me that a transformative congregation would cultivate openness. Cultivate openness, a hallmark of liberal religion. In what ways does this congregation formally and informally create space for the exploration of new ideas? How are questions, insights, and gifts of those who are new among you received? So cultivate openness. And then second, create opportunities. A transformative congregation might do that through classes and covenant groups and outings and more. What offerings do you create for members and friends, new and old, to continue to explore? What challenges do you intentionally engage? Create opportunities. And third and finally, a transformative congregation creates an environment that sustains transformation. How is someone who has bravely engaged change and transformation find support? Are they appreciated for the struggle they've endured? Or are they somehow, perhaps inadvertently, shamed for who they used to be? A transformative congregation accepts you with all your baggage, and yet it doesn't expect you to carry that baggage for the next 20 years. You may arrive with all sorts of woundedness, but you are here to heal and move beyond that. You are here to discover what is possible for you. Can we both accept people for who they are and celebrate the transformations they undergo? I hope that our congregations, all of our congregations, will strive to be crucibles of transformation, cultivating openness, creating opportunities, and sustaining transformation. Transformation, to take on new form, new understandings of ourselves, our world, our place in the world. This is deeply spiritual work. As a liberal religious tradition, Unitarian Universalism is particularly well suited to provide this preparation, opportunity, and support. I continue to have many questions about the transformation process, but I am convinced that it is a spiritual process that is critical to human development. And as such, it's one I wish to commend to each individual, and is one I wish to commend to this and all of our communities. So this will be truly a congregation that changes lives and transforms the world. May it be so.